walked away from my Jewish and Iranian identity. I'm not going to do that this time, because if we're not there, 10 toes down, feet down on the ground, chest up, saying what we're saying, then who's going to say it? This is the same thing I say to people when they get mad, within the Jewish community, how can you vote right or how can you vote left? It's like, would you rather those spaces were just completely unified, like no Jews there? So I think it's important for our voices to be heard across the political spectrum, across the board. We need seats at every table where we can get them.
And people like you and me are like the antithesis of tribal people anyway. Like we don't fit in any pigeonholes, They look at you and they're like, oh, Iranian, therefore he must, hate America and he must, whatever it is that they have their stereotypical assessment. They probably assume you're a Muslim, you know what I mean? Like, but we don't fit in any of those molds already. And so whether it's Muslim, ex-Muslim, Arab, Jew, right wing, left wing, all of these labels, I'm not interested in any of them. And I don't think any of them are helpful. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Matthew Nouriel. And of course, I know you all know him. You're going to recognize his face from his countless viral videos. I was just saying to Matthew that after October 7th, when the whole world was going crazy, his was one of the voices that I found on Instagram and I just latched onto like a person who was suffocating and found oxygen. He's been such a wonderful voice of reason, such a beautiful soul. And I'm really, really very grateful that he's here on this podcast today to chat with you. Matthew serves as the Director of Community Engagement at JIMENA, which means the Jews Indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. It's based in Los Angeles, California, but Matthew himself, his family, comes from Iran. He is an activist and a content creator of Iranian Jewish heritage. Matthew is dedicated to advocating for LGBTQ plus rights, promoting equality within the Iranian and Jewish communities, combating anti-Semitism, and supporting the Women Life Freedom Movement for a free Iran. Matthew actively works to expose the hypocrisy within the anti-Israel movement and to counter claims of pinkwashing, especially following the events of October 7th. In recognition of his impactful work, Matthew received the TrailBlazer Award at the 2021 JQ International Annual Impact Awards. Incredibly well-deserved. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you so much, Yasmine. It's such an honor to be on your podcast, which I'm a huge fan of. And thank you so much for the beautiful and kind introduction.
So let's talk about your background, because that's an interesting one. So you're a Persian Jew, grew up in LA. What was that like? That's an intermingling of different cultures, different identities, different ethnicities. How was it for you? How did you feel growing up? Did you feel a sense of not really belonging in LA? And I'm adding to this the gay community too, because you probably might have sometimes felt like you were maybe a little less connected to your community with the LGBT community as much as other times because of, political disagreements. So just talk to me a little bit about just growing up with this intermingling of different cultural identities and how did it, turn into the Matthew that we see here sitting today?
Sure. So firstly, I want to clarify, I was actually born in London and raised there until I was in high school.
Even more.
Yeah, the plot thickens. But when my parents divorced, my mom brought me and my brother to Los Angeles. I was 14 years old at the time, and my dad stayed in London because my mom's whole family, my parents got married right before the revolution and moved to the UK. At that time, my mother was expecting to go visit her family twice a year, whatever. And then the revolution happened. My mom became stuck outside of Iran. She couldn't go back. And her entire family had to flee. And when they fled throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, they all came to Los Angeles. So when my parents split, my mom wanted to be here with them. What was it like growing up with this intersection of identities. It was not easy. You brought up the term belonging, and that was definitely not something that I felt growing up, not in London. Less so in London than in Los Angeles. I think in Los Angeles, I kind of began to find my footing a little bit as a teenager. But, I went to an all Ashkenazi Orthodox Jewish school in London. I was one of only a few Mizrahi kids. And there were so many things that just didn't, for example, my family was completely secular. Like my parents are completely secular. They don't speak Hebrew. They're not religious. We keep the major holidays. We have Shabbat every Friday, but that was the extent of it. So there was that. I didn't fit in my school for that reason, and I didn't fit in because I was one of the brown kids, few brown kids, and also I was very visibly queer from an early age, which was not easy in the 80s. So it was difficult. My childhood was not the easiest. A sense of belonging was not something that I ever had. And then once we came to Los Angeles, that's when I sort of, like I said, I began to find my footing and discover who I am, which is what we do as teenagers. And I actually came out quite young. I came out when I was 15. And that was an insane experience in itself. I think I felt a sense, growing up in a Middle Eastern family or whatever, like I felt like a sense of, not that my dad was abusive or anything, he certainly wasn't, but for whatever reason around the gay issue, I felt more comfortable with my mother, which is probably quite common, I'd imagine. And I didn't expect the reaction that I got when I did come out. I was very naive. I thought, well, she'd be okay with it because when she got divorced, she went to cosmetology school and she left her teacher, who was gay. It was quite the opposite. I was taken to psychiatrists, I was taken to doctors, I was taken to a whack job Iranian doctor in Los Angeles who said he's gay because of the hormone imbalance and put me on testosterone therapy for 3 months. And it was not an easy experience.
This was in the United States of America?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it was illegal. I'd have to look into it. I don't think that was allowed even in the 90s. I could be wrong. But just going to that doctor's office like 2-3 times a week for these hormone shots, the nurse would look at me like I was filth. And there are still within the Iranian community here. I mean, I know for a fact that there's still psychiatrists who claim that they can de-gay your kids. So I mean, that's a whole other issue. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but it wasn't easy. But I mean, despite the therapists and the medications and the hormone therapy, I was still gay. Like nothing changed that. And because of all of these experiences, I sort of viewed my Iranian and my Jewish and Iranian Jewish identities as the reason for a lot of suffering that I endured as a young person. And so I kind of really tried my best to pull away from both of those parts of my identity for quite a number of years. And it wasn't until I was well into my 30s, like, a few years ago, that a friend of mine who worked at actually JQ International, who we mentioned earlier, he started a Persian Pride fellowship at JQ International. And you didn't have to be Jewish to be part of it. It was just for Persian LGBT people. And he asked me if I would join the fellowship, and he asked me if I would come to this panel discussion that they were doing. And if I'm being honest, I thought, it's not gonna, let me go support him because nobody's gonna show up to this. And I showed up to this panel discussion late because Persian Standard Time, and I was relegated to the back of the room because it was standing room only, and I was flabbergasted. And I just thought, what has been going on within the world that I've pulled myself away from in this time? And I actually was angry at myself because I felt like I could have been part of that. And in a sense, I think I was part of that without knowing it. But through that, through my friend, his name's Arya Marvalze, through the work that he did, I started getting back in touch with who I am in terms of, I spent so much of my life figuring out who I am in terms of my LGBT identity. And I tried so hard to reject my Jewish identity and Iranian identity. And I forgot what I learned through the process of becoming in touch with my LGBT identity is that you can't run away from you can't run away from who you are. Who you are is who you are. And I thought I could foolishly run away from being Iranian or run away from being Jewish. You can't. It's like running away from having brown hair or running away from having blue eyes. You can't. You are who you are. You can put contact lenses on, you can bleach your hair, but it ain't going to change anything. You still are who you are. So because of that and what my friend had created, I dove headfirst into it. And that's when I learned to say, you can't run away from who you are. I am who I am. And let me plant both feet firm on the ground, 10 toes down, chest up. I am who I am. I'm part of your communities, whether you like it or not. So we're going to have to deal with each other because I'm not going anywhere. Now, the irony in all of this is that today I'm now having to do that with the LGBT community, which is the community that taught me to do that in the first place. But luckily, I know now I'm not going anywhere, and I can't hide that part of who I am. I can't pretend it's not part of who I am. So again, we're gonna have to deal with each other,
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, it's not too long at all. I actually have so many follow-up questions. Like, first of all, what a tumultuous year, 14 traveling across the planet, coming to a whole different country. And then at 15 coming out, like that must have been a really, and I mean, being 14, 15 years old is already difficult in and of itself, even without these huge life-changing difficulties that you were going through. And then to have that crazy ass doctor thrown at you and all of that hate, I have to tell you, I completely understand, completely empathize with you when you say that you wanted to separate yourself from your Persian and Jewish identity because it brought you trauma, it brought you darkness, it brought, the way your mother reacted was very hurtful. And so you kind of, extrapolated from that, like, okay, Iranian community, Iranian people, Persian culture, this is how they're going to treat me. And that's the way the doctor was treating you, that's the way his secretary was treating you. So you'd seen enough, you don't need to have you just need to have a few examples for you to be like, okay, this is unsafe for me, so I want to stay away from that. So that was, that's what you had to do to keep yourself safe, and that's perfectly understandable. And in fact, it was the smart thing to do at the time because you needed to protect yourself. But to be able to get to a point where you were out of love for your friend and wanting to support him, where you were willing, after all those years, to step back into this and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to give it a chance. Like that took a lot of bravery that you just kind of skimmed past. That's very, very brave. And there was probably a lot of, I mean, for you to be angry at yourself was really unfair. That wasn't, you shouldn't have been, you don't need, that's not right. You got to be kinder to yourself and fairer to yourself. And you did the right thing at the time, and we can only do what we can do with the knowledge that we have at the time. And when the knowledge changed, the information changed, and you realize like, oh, okay, there's progress, then you, like you said, firmly planted your 2 feet and said, I want to be a part of this progress. I want to be a part of this, positive change. And so that was really wonderful to see. Talk to me now about what you kind of mentioned at the end there about how you had to do this all over again with the LGBT community that taught you to be yourself unapologetically, that taught you that all parts of you are, important and valuable and should be, celebrated and nourished. And suddenly you found yourself at odds in that community. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I want to say thank you for everything you just said. That was like a therapy session in 2 minutes, and that was amazing. Thank you. I never thought about it in those terms, and I appreciate you so much for recognizing all of that. I think, this anti-Zionism, which as far as I'm concerned is anti-Semitism, whether people realize it or not, it's been festering in LGBT spaces for quite some time. Um, I remember seeing it even before I knew anything about anything. Like, I remember going to a gay club once when I was like in my 20s, and it was a Middle Eastern gay night, and I met somebody there, and I was very naive, not the sharpest tool up until just a few years ago, I will say. And we're meeting this guy, and we're talking, and he goes, "Where are you from?" I go, "I'm an Iranian Jew," and he goes, his whole face just changed, and he was like, "Well, I'm Palestinian." And I was a little tipsy. I just grabbed him and kissed him, and I said, "We're cousins. I love you." Didn't go over so well.
Mhm.
So this kind of mindset's been kind of coddled by the LGBT community for a while, which is why I bring that up. But since October 7th, it's absolutely exploded where it's become kind of the norm. I do want to name that as much as we see of it, I don't think it's the majority of the LGBT community. I think there are fragments of the community where it's more prevalent. I don't know why, but I just anecdotally from what I've seen, it seems a lot of lesbians are very like harshly on board with like anti-Zionism. But I will also say that for the most part, people that I've encountered, even online, like the perfect example would be anytime I post anything about this particular issue, I will inevitably get DMs or comments from people who are actually from a slightly older generation of LGBTQ people who will thank me for speaking up about this, because this current generation doesn't really seem to understand what real persecution is, especially for gay people, and the absolute cognitive dissonance in throwing your entire weight behind a movement which, let's face it, they want to see
Wants you
gay
dead.
people dead even more than they want to see Jews dead. Okay? Like a Jew can walk up and say, "You know what? I'm an anti-Zionist. I'm on board with you." They'll be good with you. A gay person, forget it. So, yeah, I don't even remember what the actual question was. I'm just kind of going off on a
No, you're
tangent.
answering it. This is exactly it. And I'm couple of things. First of all, broke my heart when you told me that story about the kissing the Palestinian guy in the club, because that was my experience. I'm not sure if I wrote about it in my book or not, but that dichotomy of like the Jewish person thinking, "We're cousins, I love you," and the Muslim person being like, "I hate you, you're filth." Like that is a very common, unfortunately, that's a very common first meeting between an Arab and a Jew. That was my experience that I had at about 17 or 18 years old, meeting a Jewish guy that said to me, "I'm your cousin." And he said it with such light in his eyes and this like exciting, like familiarity, like like we've known each other forever. And I recoiled in horror and disgust. And that has always been for me the sort of the impetus for me to push myself to speak up against the anti-Semitism and how incredibly dark and dangerous and dirty and deep it is in the Muslim community, because it's almost like I know how bad it is. And when you're living your life out here in the world, people don't know how bad it is. And even though you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to, you don't want to bring people into this dark place, it's like it needs to be said. And it's similar to what you were just saying about the LGBT community and stuff like that. It's like, unfortunately, there's a lot of, they do want you dead. They do want me dead. They do want all of us dead for all sorts of different reasons. I'm happy to hear, though, that you're saying it's a little bit less than what we have been hearing in
Yeah.
mainstream media, which doesn't surprise me so much, because it's always the worst voices that are the loudest. And also what you said about being older people. I mean, I remember at my talks, this trans woman came out to me and she was crying, and she was telling me about how she started going to the is it called the range or something, where you go practice shooting and stuff like that. And she started
Oh,
carrying, this was at Stanford University, where she's like, it's completely left land. And but feeling so unsafe and feeling like I have to protect myself because nobody else is going to protect me. Because if I speak up against this within my community, within the LGBT community, I get demonized as the bad guy. So she got to the point where she's like, I just have to take care of myself. And that was really sad to see. So I guess I'm glad to hear that maybe it's not as bad as that, because maybe I
So
was one of those people that had a skewed
no, it's
understanding.
not skewed. You actually touched on something that's, you said in left spaces. And I think it's important to understand that this mindset is a product, what's not a product of, but it's something that's coming out of the left. And it's important to understand that most LGBTQ people are going to align with the left just because it's the left that accepted us. It's the left that made LGBT
Mhm.
rights a thing, right? It wasn't coming from the right.
Of course, yeah.
Unfortunately, what's happened though is that the polarization of politics in the West and tribal mindset when it comes to politics in the West has caused people to now be like, okay, if you want to be part of the left, you have to believe in A, B, C, and D, and you can't stray from that in any way, shape, or form, right? So I think that's what we're seeing. I think the broader issue beyond it being something that's in the LGBT community is that it's a part of the left. And we are seeing now voices from the queer community who are going more right. People are accusing me of it all the time. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in those labels, right and left. It does nothing for us, and I'm not interested in it. But we are seeing more voices and it's because of that. It's like you can't hold us to a chokehold and be like, you have to believe in this, and that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way. And now that you're telling me that I have to believe that this, and that are things that would see me dead, it makes no sense. So
Hmm.
I think what I learned in my life is, in the past when I said I walked away from my Jewish and Iranian identity, I'm not going to do that this time because if we're not there, 10 toes down, feet down on the ground, chest up, saying what we're saying, then who's going to say it? It's like this is the same thing I say to people when they get mad, within the Jewish community, how can you vote right or how can you vote left? It's like, would you rather those spaces were just completely unified, like no Jews there? It's the same with this. Um, so I think it's important for our voices to be heard across the political spectrum, across the board. We need seats at every table where we can get them. So
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly said. And people like you and me are like the antithesis of tribal people anyway. Like we don't fit in any pigeonholes, you know? They look at you and they're like, oh, Iranian, therefore he must, hate America and he must, whatever it is that they have there as their stereotypical assessment. They probably assume you're a Muslim. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
but we don't fit in any of those molds already. And so whether it's Muslim, ex-Muslim, Arab, Jew, right wing, left wing, I'm going to all of these labels. I'm not interested in any of them, and I don't think any of them are helpful. And some people want to be part of their tribes, and they don't. Look, all respect to people who identify within these tribes, but it's a lot easier to not have to think. It's a lot easier to be part of a group and for them to tell you, we believe this. This is what we are going to vote for. This is what we are going to advocate for. This is what we're going to protest against. And some people love that. My mom was one of those people. She'd look at libraries and bookstores and be like, oh my God, how exhausting. Look at all these books, and they still feel like they don't know anything. I just have to read one book and I have all the answers. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like that kind of moral certitude, which to me was just like mind blowing. But they're different strokes for different folks. So some people like to be part of these, tribes and to have everything laid out for them, in a little yellow brick road. But you certainly don't. I certainly don't. I think most of the listeners of my podcast and certainly the people that are here joining us today certainly don't. We're not of that ilk. And so I completely agree with what you're saying. I think you're right. We do need to be heard across the spectrum. Unfortunately, not everybody agrees with us. So there's people on the left more than the right, but I'd say both actually these days try to silence voices that they don't want to be heard. They don't want, you're not fitting the narrative, you're not fulfilling, you're not pushing the agenda that I'm trying to push. And so I don't want your voice to be heard. And this is why my talks get canceled in universities across the world. This is why it was so hard to get my book published. And I'm sure you probably experienced similar things as well, where you just feel like there's people around that do not want your voice to be heard because what you are saying counters their very strongly crafted, deeply funded narrative.
Yeah.
Is that
No,
true?
100% it's true. And I just, it's really actually sad to me that people need everything laid out for them because they can't think for themselves. And I think that going through life experiences like I've gone through, and you going through life experiences like that you've gone through, have helped you to realize when you grow up not fitting in any box, it kind of prepares you to be able to stand up and say, I don't fit in that box, and that's fine. I don't want to fit in that box. I'd rather, go at life alone. And there's a certain sadness to that, but there's also a strength to that I respect and appreciate so much more within yourself, within myself. I respect it so much more than anybody who just needs to go along with, the script that's been laid out for them.
100%. So tell me about the work that you're doing with JIMENA. Am I pronouncing that properly?
Yeah, JIMENA. So JIMENA is an acronym for Jews Indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. It's an organization that was created right after 9/11 by Jewish former refugees from North Africa.
So wait, just so we can get the timeline right.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about you and your growth and going through your kind of mixed identity and like putting your Judaism and Iranianness on the side and then embracing it and all that. At what point did you join JIMENA? Was it after you already had been to this event that you spoke about? Yeah.
Yes, so JIMENA, I was hired at JIMENA 3 years ago.
Okay. More recently.
Yeah, much more recently.
So did it help you to sort of solidify who you are and to feel that sense of belonging that we were talking about before? Do you feel it now with this group?
With the organization and the people that I work with, yes, absolutely. It was interesting because I worked for 6 years for a major tech company. I don't want to name them because I don't know what the laws and whatever are. They're like a major tech company in the events department. I was an event producer, and through the work that I started doing with Allyship, who I mentioned before, I began getting more involved with the Jewish nonprofit, gay Jewish nonprofit, so on and so forth. And when COVID happened, I stopped working where I was working, and I was like, I want a career change. And I was applying for all these jobs at nonprofits in the Jewish nonprofit world, and nobody was hiring me. I don't need to get into whatever reasons I think or what they could or could not be, but eventually my same friend Ari was like, this organization JIMENA, have you heard of them? I said, yeah, I've heard of them. He said they're hiring. I was like, I'm done. I left such a bad taste in my mouth because I just got off of like a round of 4 interviews with another org, and I really wanted that job and I didn't get it. But then I thought, let me just send in my application, and I sent it in, and then I got an interview, second interview, third interview, fourth interview, was hired. And I realized in that whole process that things really do always work out how they're supposed to work out. I don't know how that works, but it works, and you have to have faith in it. And B, that I definitely landed in the right place because our perfect example, within 2 months of working there, our executive director, Sarah Levin, they sent me out on a speaking thing in Houston for Stand With Us Teens. And at that time, I was like, my talk is just about LGBT issues being, I was doing a lot more drag back then. I was like, it's about being a drag queen in the Jewish world and all of these things. I don't think this is right for what this is. And the Stand With Us person kept saying, no, we want you, we want you, we want you. And I was like, all right. So I got there. Sure enough, I gave this talk. Sure enough, there's this mother of one of their older teens going into college in the background videoing me. And I'm like thinking, what's going on there? I wasn't saying anything. I certainly didn't deem any of it inappropriate, but whatever. So I went up to the girl afterwards who brought me in, and I said, "What was?" She was talking to her after she walked away. I said, "What was that about?" And she said, she's really upset, this and that. And I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. The point of saying all of this is when I got back to LA, I had a call with my executive director. I told her what happened, and she just looked at me. We were on Zoom. She just looked at me and said, you pissed them off?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Great, then you're doing your job as an activist." And I was like, wow, okay, I'm definitely in the right place.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, so it's
Pushing boundaries and opening
yeah,
minds, cracking them open.
yeah, you got
Yeah.
to, right? But anyway, back to how the organization started, what they're about. They initially started after 9/11 because with all the discussion surrounding 9/11, these former refugees from Middle Eastern and North African countries noticed that the identity of people from the Middle East and North Africa were being flattened out as Sunni Arab Muslims,
Yeah.
which is fine. There are majority Sunni Arab Muslims, but there are many other identities that aren't being accounted for now. So it just started out with like showing up to calling universities or showing up to various events and being like, "This is our food, this is our music, this is how we dressed." And then when our current executive director came on board, I think around 2010, if I'm not mistaken, she kind of took it to the next level and like, so we got to take this beyond what it is now and turn it into an organization that focuses primarily on advocacy and on education, which is what we do today. It's about educating within the broader Jewish world and the world in general about who we are as Jews, that Jews didn't all experience diaspora in Europe, and that there's a whole other side to Jewish identity, which, if I might say, it's a bit of a misnomer, Jews indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa, in reference to us,
Yeah.
because as far as I'm concerned, and all
All
of us
Jews.
men are concerned, all Jews are indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. But because of that, we were able to get our foot in the door with things like the California Ethnic Studies curriculum, which was before I started working with JIMENA, but they were able to put up their hand and go, "Excuse me, you're presenting us all as white European colonial usurpers, and we're not, and here's why." So our organization was instrumental in that. So because of that and the coalition of other organizations, they did include Mizrahi Jews within their curriculum, though nobody seems to use that section. We also created, if you go to SephardiToolkit.org, we've created free lesson plans for educators or anybody who really wants to learn about who Mizrahi and Sephardi Jews are. And it's a very extensive site, just a wealth of information there about and it's a living site, so we add to it all the time, but everything from the Holocaust with Jews in the Middle East and North Africa, to the Inquisition, to where did Jews come from, how did we end up in Iran, Iraq, so on and so forth. So it's a lot of incredible work that I'm certainly very proud to be a part of this organization.
Yeah, you absolutely should be. It's doing really important work, and it's still for many people here in North America and probably all throughout Europe as well. It's still quite surprising to them. They're still not used to that. They're used to the narrative of Jewish people being, interlopers into Israel, that they're not indigenous to the Middle East, that they came from Germany and from Poland and, kicked out the Arabs and took over their land. This is the narrative that they've all been fed and that they've all swallowed. And if they know anything that is true about the Jewish reality, Jewish history, is they'll know things around World War II. They'll know things about the Holocaust and the specifically Ashkenazi experience, children of Holocaust survivors or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. So they're hearing those stories, but they've never heard of the Farhud in Iraq. They've never heard of, Egyptian and Yemeni and, Algerian, et cetera, Syrian, all of those Jewish people that were kicked out of their homes. In fact, Israel today, I think it's 60 to 70% Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, if I'm getting my numbers correct. But it's definitely the majority.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
60%. Um,
60%, yeah.
yeah.
So it's like it's still new to people. They're still shocked. They're still like, "What? What are you talking about? I thought Jews were from Brooklyn." Like they don't know that you exist. And so that's why the work that you're doing is so important. And I don't know how we can spread it out there in the world. I'm trying to do as much as I can. Obviously, you're doing so much work into that, trying to get people to see and understand, to widen the lens. But I think that when they talk about World War II, they get to center themselves, when they get to talk about what they did and what their involvement was. But when you're talking about the Farhud, for example, in Iraq and all of the atrocities that happened there, then it's like they're not in the conversation. They're not part of it. And so they almost don't want to acknowledge it or don't feel
Mhm.
like they have the right to talk about it or something like that. There's some sort of resistance from learning about the Jewish experience across the world. I mean, I haven't even talked about Russia and the Caribbean. I mean, it's literally across the world. But we're only hearing about this one specific experience, and I think it might have something to do with the fact that they get to be centered in that story. But that's just
It's
my
very possible. I mean,
opinion.
I think if I'm being completely honest, and I hate talking about stuff like this because a lot of anti-Semites and anti-Zionists take it and run with it. But the truth of the matter is, though, I think a lot of us within the broader Jewish community did a disservice to ourselves by ignoring those parts of our history. Because I actually just wrote an op-ed about this in the Jewish Journal. I truly believe with every fiber of my being that us as Jews, we are one people. I mean, this is historically factual, and we were scattered
Yeah.
across the world, right? We can't pick and choose which part of our history we want to share. When I grew up going to those schools in London, to that school in London, I learned about the Holocaust, I learned about the pogroms, a little bit about the Inquisition. I never learned about anything else, right? I never once doubted or questioned that that was part of my history as a Jew. But when I see people within the Jewish community who may not have been exposed to these other histories before, look at it as if it's something that happened to them over there. We can't do that. We need a
Yeah.
holistic approach to who we are, and we need to learn the whole history of who we are, what we've been through. Um, there was something else you touched on that I really wanted to talk about, and now I don't remember what it was. There's just so much here to cover. Um, 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 um,
Was it
I'm sure it'll
about
come back to me.
people in the West centering themselves in the story? So that's why they'll
Oh,
only.
yes. So I want to say this in today's climate, I think it's outside of the Jewish community, it's a very inappropriate, sorry, not inappropriate, uh, inconvenient truth. The fact that there are Jews whose diaspora experiences were in the Middle East or North Africa, because when you trace that lineage, it all becomes very clear. You get a very clear line of who we are, where we ended up, and how we got to where we got to, right? And if you're going around saying that Jews are all white colonialists and European usurpers, and then all of a sudden this group of people show up who are visibly not that, who you can never accuse of being that, though people still try to, it really sort of bursts that bubble. So it's an inconvenient truth to a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And no matter how much evidence is thrown at them, they still try to deny it and they still try to push their narratives. I'm going to add something here. I mean, it's different when you criticize your own community because you're Jewish, but I'm going to say something that I've seen too that I felt probably wasn't very helpful. But again, please forgive me, all people that are listening who obviously have a much deeper understanding of this than I do. But from my perspective, and I understand where it was coming from. But there was this real need for Jewish people from the Middle East and North Africa to really not ever identify themselves as Arabs and to not identify with the Arab culture, the Arabic food, Arabic language. It was all very like, that's us and them. And I understand why, because obviously you were persecuted and tortured by these people because Arabs are usually Muslim, and that's what you were responding to, and that's what you're reacting to, and that's why you wanted to separate yourselves and be individuals. But what that ended up doing is it gave this perspective to other outsiders looking in that Jewish people really were an other. And they
Mhm.
actually aren't. It's almost like saying Pakistanis and Indians are others. Sure, they can say that as much as they want. There's political lines there, but there's also DNA. You guys are all from the same land. You're the same people. You put an arbitrary line there. You gave yourselves a different name. You gave yourselves a different language, and now you're saying that you're two completely different people. But Jews are from the same land as Arabs, as Muslims, right? Like you all grew up in this, we all come from the same land. My father's family, who are from Gaza, they look like the Israelis that are from the same land for generations. You know what I mean? It's like the food somehow separating, this is my shawarma, this is your shawarma, this is my hummus, this is your hummus. It's like that's what happens over time when groups of people evolve differently and stuff like that. But if you go back to the roots, it's like we all dress the same, we all looked the same, we all spoke the same. We had much, much more of a shared culture back then than we do now. And then denying that has kind of given fodder to those people that want to pretend that Jewish people are not indigenous to the Middle East and that they are this separate, different thing. And it's like it's so not true. And if you travel anywhere, in the Middle East, and you will find so much evidence. I mean, some of it's really heartbreaking, especially in countries like Egypt, where not a single Jew lives anymore, you know where
Yeah.
there's like deep, deep hundreds, like thousands of year old history there of Jewish people and how they were eradicated, erased,
Yeah.
ethnically cleansed, but they are part of this land. This is their land. This is their world. And anybody saying otherwise is lying to you to try and fulfill some kind of agenda. That's just the truth.
So I feel like there's so much to unpack in everything that you just said. And I'm trying to figure out how to do this succinctly. So in terms of the term Arab Jew and Jews separating themselves from that, I'm sure you've read Albert Memmi's Colonized versus Colonizer, and where he very clearly says, I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, we would have liked to be Arab Jews, but they never allowed us, basically.
Yeah.
We were looked at as an other.
Mhm.
And we were. I mean, this is maybe 100-year-old idea that we were not of a different ethnicity or not of a different
No,
group,
it's true. You had like
right?
Jewish quarter, like this was a Jewish
Yeah.
area. Yeah.
Yeah. We were viewed as an immigrant,
Dhimmi.
as
Yeah.
a dhimmi or as a foreign thing.
Hmm.
A lot of this happened, and I'm sorry to say, but a lot of this happened with the Arab Muslim conquest, and we know this.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that that's where there's a difference with the Iranian Jews. People will say, well, how come you're saying Arab Jews don't want to call themselves Arab Jews, but how come Persian Jews will call themselves Persian Jews? Well, you have to understand a lot of these Jewish populations were in these countries before the Arab conquest, before any of it was called Arab land, right? So
Yeah.
there's that element. And Persia,
No, that's a really good point.
yeah, and when Jews got to Persia, it was Persia. I mean, it didn't become an Arab land. So yeah, it's when you have a history of people who are being othered by the people that they're living amongst, and it's like now, we're seeing that people, again, the anti-Zionist movement really would love it if now the Middle Eastern Jews or Jews from Arab countries started calling themselves Arab Jews. The reason they like that is because then they get to say, well, if you're an Arab Jew, then you're not from, Israel. Then that's not your indigenous land. Your indigenous land is Yemen, or it's Iraq, or it's, wherever, Egypt. It's a very
They'll find a
complex.
way.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It's a
They'll
complex.
find a way. Yeah.
They always find a way. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I think that people should identify however the hell they want to identify. Adults get to choose how to be whoever the hell they want to be. If there
Hmm.
are Jews who came from Arab countries who like to refer to themselves as Arab Jews or who feel very connected to that, more power to you. What I do know is
Hmm.
the majority of Jews from Arab countries do not identify as that. And they usually say it's because we weren't allowed to or because we were treated as other. Why should we take that now after we've been expelled or fled or forced to flee or whatever? Now they want to take that identity on. It's a little fishy.
I completely understand that. I totally get that. And you're absolutely correct about the dhimmi situation, which for those of you who are listening, if you don't know what we're referring to, when it's an Arab land, so when it was like, under the Ottoman Empire, whether it's under any kind of Islamic rule, um, Christians and Jews were allowed to live on the same land as Muslims, but they were second-class citizens called dhimmis, and they had to pay a special head tax called the jizya, which was just a tax for them to be allowed to live there, basically. And if you were neither a Christian nor a Jew, then you simply weren't allowed on Muslim land. So that was like the generosity of Muslims towards Christians and Jews. You get to live here, but you're a second-class citizen and you have to pay for your, for the privilege of living amongst us. So yeah, there was always a separation there, which would make it was an arbitrary separation that was there for the purposes of, obviously for persecuting people as an other. And that's very true. That's an incredibly important part of the history that I didn't touch on. It's just frustrating to me how common it is for people to just not acknowledge, not accept, not know as like basic knowledge that Jewish people are from the exact same region as Muslims, because it's so strange. It's like, where do you think this all evolved from? Like, Jews were there first. Hello? They're the first in the trilogy, and then Christians and then Muslims. Like, that's where Christianity started. That's where Islam started. So why are you questioning that's where Judaism or Jewish people started? Like, it's very nonsensical. But like you said, it's all political at the end of the day. They're going to push whatever, simplistic narrative is going to look good on some TikTok video and is going to push their agenda, and truth be damned.
But it's also interesting. I mean, you mentioned that your father's family, who are from Gaza, look no different than Jews, which is, I believe there's genetic testing and scientific testing that backs the claim up that there's a certain portion within the current Palestinian population that can trace back that they were Jews who were forced to convert. And that was a very common thing with the conquest. Convert or die. I mean, it happened in
very common.
People wanted their lives to be easier, so they did convert.
That's the story of most of the 57 Arab or Muslim majority countries around the world today.
And then also I want to name that, when you speak to Jews from Iraq, a lot of them will refer to themselves as Babylonian Jews instead of Arab, because it was Babylon when they got there. It wasn't Arab. And that's why, Persian Jews, Babylonian Jews, Syrian Jews.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the term Mizrahi is an umbrella term, which I love a good umbrella term because it makes life easier in terms of conversation. But if you really, really want to respect people's identities, I think that that's a good way to do it. I personally feel like that's more productive than Arab Jews, because it just doesn't really fit. But those who disagree with me, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, I completely hear where you're coming from. I don't know if I'm not asking people to change their identity or to call themselves Arab Jews, but I don't know. I want it to be more mainstream that Jews and Arabs and Muslims, like, they're all coming from this same land. Like, it's such a distortion of reality that for whatever reason, that's just not the mainstream understanding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's easier to hate us for the reasons that people hate us if we're not from there, unfortunately. And we don't need to get into the whole, the Soviet propaganda campaign.
Another level.
Yeah, but all of that the way that it's seeped into academia, which is on purpose, thanks to the Islamic regime in Iran and thanks to Qatar.
Qatar.
Yeah. This is what people are, it's coming from the top. This
Yeah.
ideology and mindset and false information is coming straight from the top. And I sometimes I'm like, we're all doomed. I don't know what we're supposed to
Yeah.
do about this. But yeah.
I know. It's so disheartening. Like I was looking at these statistics for like how many billions of dollars are being thrown into American universities, and the number one funder of American universities by like a few billion is Qatar. And then number two was China. So I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. Like it's just really bad out there, folks. So it's we have a huge battle on our hands. And as I've said many times, we haven't been engaged in this fight. We're coming up now, you know, just after they've been working in this area for billions of dollars for decades, for so much time and energy, blood, sweat, and tears that have been put into this propaganda for so long. And, what has Israel been doing, right? Focusing on technology, focusing on medicine, focusing on, progressing their country and bettering themselves. They weren't focusing on like, building tunnels and pushing narratives. And so now it's like we come to this point where we're so far behind trying to, like that old quote from Winston Churchill about the truth has a chance to get around the world, or what is it? A lie has a chance to get around the world before the truth gets a chance to put its pants on. That's where we're at now. We're like trying to get our pants on and run out there and go, no, 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 no. Don't listen to these to these lies you've been told and these billions of dollars that have been spent feeding you these lies. This is the reality, but it's like it's a difficult job, and I'm very grateful that you're in it. I see you, I hear you, I feel you, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And
And you as
right
well.
before we, thank you. Before we go into questions and comments from people here, I just want to ask you, because you do a lot of activism, you do a lot of advocacy, and I think this is probably going to be a hard question for you to answer, but what is the main message that you're trying to get across? Like if you could get people's ears to hear one statement from you and to really understand it and for it to land in their hearts, what is the
Oh,
thing that you really want people to get?
I think I don't know if this is answering this correctly, but I think at the core of what I'm doing, right, and all of the work that I try to do centers around where my identity intersects is Middle Eastern, Jewish, and gay. And I think at the core of what I'm doing is to ask people to think outside of the box and think outside of the narrative that they're being spoon-fed, no matter what it is. Always question everything. Do not rest on your laurels. You can't trust anything. This is a very like paranoid Middle
No,
Eastern
it's so
vibe,
good
by the
advice,
way.
especially in these
But
days, though. You're right. It is very Middle Eastern. They're all spies.
my dad talking right now. Like, don't trust anyone. Like, but you can't trust anything that comes out of media, anything that comes out of the news, anything that comes out of social media. That's why, and I've been slacking on doing this for a long time. Usually under my posts, I will put do not rely on social media. It's not a news source, it's not a history book, it's nothing. Use this as a launching pad to go and research whatever it is that I'm
Yeah.
talking about. Don't take my word for anything, right? So I think at the core of everything I do, it's search for the truth, find the truth, and once you've found the truth, speak that truth or do whatever it is that you do with the truth, right? Um, and also, like, for God's sake, I'm bad at this myself sometimes, but try to come from a place of kindness. We're all human beings at the end of the day. And again, I miss that a lot of the time,
You
but
don't at all, Matthew. I've never seen you miss at all. In fact, I'm amazed and in awe at your compassion. More than once, I've been like, I don't know where this man gets his level of empathy from. Like, you certainly should not be berating yourself about that. That's something that you are incredibly, like just a gift and a lesson for us all, for
thank
us all
you.
to aspire to be as compassionate as you are towards people who have zero compassion to you. So, yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
that is a great lesson that I have learned from you for sure. So you did succeed in
Thank
getting
you.
that
I
message
think I think the
across.
problem is when you are on it, like people mistake honesty or blatant, blunt honesty for a lack of compassion, and it's not. I remember right around when October 7th happened, I posted something uh, about the Arab slave trade.
Mhm.
Um, and somebody said in the comments, this triggered me so hard. They wrote, unfollow, check your racism. And I was like, I went on a tangent. I was just like typing for, I'm like, real racism. Who's racist? I'm just telling the truth. Would I be racist if I was talking about the European, slave trade? No, 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 I'm not racist. I'm not racist. And I realized like you can't like win with everyone. But stuff like that always makes me wonder, like, should I try to soften my tone on certain issues? Or but at the end of the day, when I really think about it, no, we need to get comfortable with the truth, whether it's the truth that we like or not. And a perfect example would be, and forgive me, I'm so bad with names. Who is the Palestinian mother that you had on who
Layla. Layla.
Laila
Hmm.
posted about it because that episode of
Hmm.
yours was a reminder for me because I'd met Layla 6 months before October 7th when I was in Israel at a conference. And even then, I just remember I reminded myself that I have to lead with compassion at the end of the day. Nobody should be losing their child, no matter what the excuse is, right? I get it. I understand conflict. I understand war. I understand intifada, this, that, the other. I get it. But if we can, on a very basic level, say that's a tragedy that shouldn't have happened, then what are we even doing? Like we need to operate from a place of compassion when it comes to them. No child deserves to die. Again, I'm on a tangent. I don't remember what my point
No,
was.
you're absolutely correct. And I mean, I could take another hour because you've touched on a topic that I'm gonna talk about in my next podcast, which is this this idea of compassion, which can, or empathy, which can sometimes be weaponized against compassionate and empathetic people. It's almost your biggest strength can end up being your biggest weakness.
Yeah,
Um, so that's something that I see happening quite often in this space. And it's something that I want to talk about more because it's a very deep issue. But, you know, first of all, for you to talk about the Arab slave trade, who even cares? That's fact. That's historical fact. You're not like
yeah.
calling people names or like making fun of them or demonizing them. You're stating a fact. So you can go ahead and do that. That's just reality. Nobody wants to talk about the Arab slave trade and how much longer it lasted and how much more across more land
And
it
it's
was
still
spanning.
happening.
No, they just want to talk about the European slave trade. It's the only one that was bad. Only white people are bad.
Yeah,
Um,
we have
and
to start dealing with
also,
the truth.
yeah. And also this thing too, like honest to God, I cannot tell you how many Israeli people on like October 8th were talking about people in Gaza. We're talking about Palestinians. Like your compassion can sometimes take a back seat. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to get angry. You're allowed to get upset. You're allowed to get sad. You're allowed to lash out. You can do that when you're in active trauma, when you're currently bleeding, when your people are currently being raped and abducted and killed. You are allowed to say whatever you want to say.
Thank
You know, this
you.
is something that's in the progressive spaces all the time, right? Don't
Yeah.
police people's speech. Let them be as angry as they want to be. Let them say what they want to say. But it's like Jewish people don't feel like, I mean, in some ways I get it too, because like as soon as you express the slightest human feelings of anger that you are completely righteous anger, it's like people are immediately like, oh yeah, see, look, that's how Jews are, blah, 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 right? They find some way, like you talking about the Arab slave trade, somehow turn that into racism. It's like these ugly people, and now I am actually referring to those people as ugly, so go ahead and call me whatever you want to call me, but people who act like that are ugly-hearted people that are just looking for a reason to hate others, and they will find it. They will always find it. And that's why when people send me these messages, they're like, why do they hate us so much, Yasmin? I'm like, you're asking the wrong question. You have to give less fucks. You are never going to convince them to love you. You are never going to convince them to see you as a human being. And so you just have to focus on your own self, loving yourself, continuing to live within your, what you know is right, right? Honoring your own light, and stop wasting energy trying to understand evil. You never will, because you are not evil. And so it's like you get stuck in this, like, but I don't get it, but it doesn't make sense. And you're going to be stuck in that, like, pathologically. It will kill you. It will diminish you, and you're never going to get to an answer. So I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but then I went ahead and talked about it
No,
anyway.
it's an important thing to talk about, honestly, and it is. And I actually remember right after October 7th putting out a video because I was livid because anytime a Jew spoke up about October 7th, if it wasn't qualified with, it had to be anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. It had to be, it was always
Yeah.
both. And it's like, give us the space and the right to say that we're angry and we're upset, and it's not about both sides. With Black Lives Matter, if anybody said all lives matter, I'm not criticizing that, but if you said all lives matter, people jump down your throat, and these same people are basically all lives mattering Jewish feelings and Jewish thoughts and Jewish grief. We should be
Yes.
allowed to speak up. And I'll say something else, actually. I think all of these people who are coming from the left who are trying to censor how we talk about the Palestinian issue, trying to push a narrative, whether they actually believe it or not, is always confusing to me. They're doing a disservice to the Palestinian people. And I firmly believe that. I just posted a post today where I likened, I said, they behave the way that the things are going, the leadership, the Palestinian leadership behaves the way they behave because it is a portion of a colonial project that has failed. It is an imperialistic project that has failed, and they're in this perpetual tantrum throwing, right? And Jews don't do that. It's the difference between a spoiled kid who's been given everything that they want, and I understand many Palestinians. It's not about on an individual level. I'm talking about on a more holistic level. And Jews have had everything taken away. Jews have always come out on top because we didn't sit there kicking, screaming, crying for 70, 80 years that this is mine, this should be mine. We did the best we could with what we had, right? And I actually feel guilty about posting this because I know people are going to take this the wrong way, as that I hate Palestinians. No, it is the absolute opposite. And I'm coming from a place of love. And I even wrote in the caption, I really hope someday soon that the Palestinians will learn from us instead of try to take us down. Because the minute that happens, there will be we all want to see a flourishing, independent Palestinian state.
Yeah.
I want that more than, but I can't want it, or we can't want it more than they want it for themselves.
I was going to say that I had a Ghazan man on this podcast, and we were saying the exact same thing. So his family is from Gaza, my family is from Gaza, and we were saying the exact same thing. It is frustrating and annoying and dehumanizing the way Palestinians are treated like this little victim group that need to be given food, that need to be fed, that we have to raise money for them, we have to give them, we have to give them, we have to give them. Where is the self-pride? Where is the self-reliance? Where is the grit? Where is the we will do this for ourselves? We will create this for ourselves. They're capable. They're more than capable. Look at Palestinians around the world. Look at them all over North America and Europe and, and in Jordan, like all over the Middle East. They're smart, capable people, but it's this infantilizing of them that is almost like encouraging them to stay down, when it's all about like you said, that spoiled kid just getting what they want. Like, here's another lollipop, here's another $1 billion, here's another whatever, instead of them saying like, we're gonna do this ourselves. We are gonna build for ourselves. We want to create a country that we are proud of, a homeland that we are proud of. But unfortunately, that's not what's happening. You've got the money and the power is all going towards the evil ones, the terrorist groups that say, no, we want to build bombs and we want to build tunnels. They're not interested in caring about the Palestinian people. They're not interested in caring about the Gazan people. They're interested in power. And, you know, the money is coming from Iran, and they're all about getting Jerusalem and blah, blah, blah. It's political aims. They don't care about the people living there. They
No,
absolutely do not care about the people living there. You know, they're being used as pawns by
yeah.
people all across the world towards their own power plays and their own political games.
How sad is that? And how sad is that
Mhm.
that so many people don't want to see that? And the truth is all there. You and I talk
Yeah.
about it until the cows come home, until we're blue in the face, right? It's all
Hmm.
there, but they choose not to look at it. So I ask you, who really loves them?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you have two kids. One of them you might be tougher on than the other one, but the other one you're coddling, and the other one grows up to be completely helpless when they grow up. And the one who you don't coddle is reliant, self-reliant, and efficient, and able and scrappy.
Hmm.
Which
Yeah.
one is real
Like you.
love?
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. And I really hope, you know, right before this episode, I had a Palestinian politician on who, I know a lot of people, I'm going to get so many emails from that conversation. He said a lot of things that I know upset a lot of people and triggered a lot of people. But at the end of the day, it's like you take what you can get. Like if it's a Palestinian, you know, politician who's speaking up with love about Israelis and about Jewish people in general, and who is feeling nothing but remorse and disgust and anger over October 7th. It's like, you know, you've got to be grateful for these glimmers of light that you see. And when there's people like that that are trying to push for different leadership of their people, trying to push Palestine and in a different direction, then those are the people that I want to see in power. You know, those are the people that I want to see, you know, calling the shots versus the ones that are there now, like I said, that are, you know,
Yeah.
it's just been death and destruction over and over and over again, and it will continue to be as long as people like that are the ones that are leading the people. And like you said, obviously this isn't all Palestinian people. You know, this podcast is an example of that. I bring as many voices as I can to counter the dominant narratives, but if your leaders are moving things in one direction, if all the money is going in one direction, then unfortunately that it's the tail that's going to wag the dog, right? So we need to, and with a lot of places in the Middle East, things do not change at grassroots. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't work that way when you're in societies that are used to like dictators and theocracies. It has to be top down. Look at UAE. Look at how wonderfully they're doing now. And
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia close on their heels. Um, it's top down. The people just follow suit. They're like, okay, that's great. We love Israel now. That's fine. We have like Israeli flags in the supermarkets selling Israeli fruit. I'm okay. I'm on board with that. But it's never going to happen bottom up. These people that are like Samit, who have rational voices, they are silenced, they are attacked, they are even killed. So
Yeah.
grassroots never works in these countries. It has to be top down. So hoping for, you know, better days ahead, better leadership ahead. You never know.
As we say in
Okay.
Persian, "Be'amida Khoda."
What do you say in Persian? Say again.
"Be'amida Khoda," with God's wish.
Oh yeah, like inshallah kind of
It's
thing.
like inshallah. Yeah, exactly. We say inshallah
Yeah.
as well, but I prefer "Be'amida Khoda."
Yeah. Yeah, because inshallah always has tinges of never gonna fucking happen. That's what inshallah means. All right, we'll start with you, Mars. We've got so many people here, so I'm gonna have to keep quiet now and let people have a chance to ask you questions, Matthew. We'll
Sure.
start with you, Mars. Go ahead.
Hi, Mars.
Yasmin, thank you as always. Hi, Matt. The question I have for you is I'd like to understand a little bit more about where the gay community is in terms of. I know it's impossible for one person to speak on behalf of the whole community, but I hope I can give you some insight as to like where they're at now. We're seeing this for lack of a better term, I'll call it a space of inconvenience for certain tribes in Western countries. Muslims and reformist Muslims as an example. They're, for the far right, they're considered, they think all Muslims are terrorists. Far left thinks Islam is a religion of peace. Um, there's anti-Semitism for Jews on the right and on the left, and now because of the woke influence and the populist influence on the left and the right, we're seeing a lot of reconstitution of how certain groups are aligning politically. From the gay community, from your perspective, do you think the right has become more friendly to homosexuals, and how does the community as a whole feel nowadays, especially the ones who notice this kind of weird moral inversion, this kind of inconvenient space that certain tribes now have to find their footing in because the left and the right are no longer, their narratives are all fucked up.
Yeah. So what was it? Was the question, do gay people feel basically okay in right spaces now? Is that what you're asking?
I think, sorry, that was a poorly worded question. Long story short, does the gay community feel uncertain in its footing, given that how crazy things on the woke left and the populist right?
I think that listen, I mean, gay community, it's not a monolith, right? You have, and it also geographically depends on where you are and what you're around. I think in places, I live in LA, right? I think places like LA and New York, it's very different than somebody who lives in, somewhere in the Midwest. I think from what I'm seeing from most people on the right, the gay thing isn't as much of an issue. But I don't think that means that we can rest on our laurels, because there are people on the far right who have vocally, they want to revert gay marriage and so on and so forth. So it's there. But we've achieved a lot of rights over the years. That is wonderful. And I think that any minority group that achieves rights should celebrate them, but also be wary of the actors who want to see them gone. I'm not as clear on the part of your question about the left. Are you asking where that gay community stands with the like within left-leaning spaces?
Well, to further clarify, you mentioned pinkwashing at the beginning of this dialogue, and you see several people who identify as LGBT, just celebrating the Palestinian flag, the Free Palestine group. Where in reality, if they step into to the Middle Eastern countries around Israel, they'll be killed simply because of the virtue of the fact they're gay. There have to be people in the LGBT community who realize this kind of moral inversion they're in, that they're supporting people who would never give them the time of day, much less their life, if they were in those countries. So I'm assuming these individuals don't see the left as an environment that's as comfortable to as them before. And a lot of us who've realized the problems with both the left and the right no longer feel stable hedging our anchor in one of these two political paradigms. So I'm kind of curious as to how you feel the overall gay community feels about the left nowadays.
I think overall the gay community is probably still left-leaning. I think with this particular issue with the pinkwashing, I think a lot of people, just like the rest of the world, just would rather stay out of it and quietly judge what they see on TV, which is a whole other issue. But again, until, there needs to be a major shift in how the right deals with LGBTQ plus issues for more of the general gay population or LGBT population to be able to align with them more. That's what I think. But I think most people, just like any people, LGBT or otherwise, just want to live a comfortable, happy life where they're, able to express themselves and be who they want to be. I will say this, I think a lot of this younger generation who are of the LGBT community that are vehemently pro-Palestine or whatever you want to call it, I think that they're incredibly spoiled and that they have no idea what it is that they're actually doing. They want to stand for some. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I was a kid watching, gay people fight for research for AIDS therapies, right? To stop HIV. I was watching people fight for the ability to have gay marriage. I was watching people fight for the right to be able to just perform in drag somewhere. These are things that were meaningful. I'm seeing this generation now, it's almost like, and it's not just the LGBT community, it's all kids. Like, they're maybe looking for something to fight for or want some kind of sense of feeling like they're fighting for something, and they've latched onto this because this movement itself has latched onto them. It's got infiltrated every social justice movement and said our causes are the same, right? And that's how that's happened. Compare that with the fact that these universities are now teaching our young people what to think instead of how to think. Critical thinking is out the window. So it's
opposite, Matthew. Teaching them what to think instead of how to think.
Yes, sorry, did I get that? Yes. Teaching them what to think instead of how to think. And if you don't know how to think, then it's the perfect recipe to have a bunch of young people. You've created an army now. Young people who won't question anything. It's very different. I hope that kind of answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Well said, Matthew. Thank you. And as somebody, I've been a post-secondary professor for like over 20 years, and I absolutely have seen that change. It's been stark. It's been frustrating. It's been infuriating. And it's really, honestly, at the end of the day, just very sad.
It is very sad, but something has to be done about it because these kids are the future. I'll tell you, I just did 2 weeks ago, I did a speaking engagement in Northern California at a college. The Jewish group brought me, and the most incredible kids, they couldn't find a room to host me in. Nobody would give them a room. They went to one of their professors and intentionally omitted the fact that I'm Jewish. They just said he's a gay Iranian. And because of that, the LGBT club, who had a physical space, said they allowed them to use the space. I went in there, started talking. The majority of the kids that were there from the LGBT club got up and left. They said, I've invaded their safe space. They don't feel safe around me. All of this nonsense that they're being taught this from the top, by the way. Meanwhile, the Jewish group that put this together had not only a group of Jewish kids there, we had a gay Arab Muslim from the UAE, we had a Christian Chinese young man, Indian, Hindu, I believe. It was true diversity. It was everything that the left says that they stand for: tolerance, inclusion, diversity. And when we say diversity, it's really important that we include diversity of thought, not just diverse skin colors.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Everything that it stands for is what it was. Meanwhile, these kids were throwing a hissy fit that they felt unsafe because an Iranian gay Jew was in there talking about something that they don't believe in. It was unbelievable to me. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, no, you said it. That's exactly it. They want diversity. They want all sorts of different skin colors and all sorts of different genders and all sorts of different ethnicities, all singing the same chorus. That's what they want.
But that's not diversity.
All regurgitating. Yeah, no diversity of thought, but certainly, well said. All right, we're going to go with Courtney, who has woken up very early in the morning in Australia to come and fangirl. Go ahead, Courtney.
Hello, Courtney. I'm so honored that you woke up so early to come be with us. Thank you.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can. Hello, lovely. Oh, you're in the bathroom.
I'm literally in the toilet at work because I really wanted to make sure I could get this in. Oh my God, I love you so much. You're amazing.
Thank you,
And Daniel, so hard. I wanted to ask you a question. So essentially, I have friends in the older queer generation, and I had friends in the younger queer generation. And I just kind of wanted to know, like, I think you briefly answered it, but just kind of the disconnect between the generations of queer people that I feel like my older friends have asked me questions about Israel. They're very curious, they're very supportive, and the younger generation just completely abandoned me. They were horrible to me as soon as the war started. And I just kind of wanted to know where this disconnect comes from and the cognitive dissonance for the younger generation of what's happening, like between the queer rights in the Middle East and then Israel, and then what they're fighting for, essentially.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's a big question. I'm going to hop off camera and keep
okay.
working on the listen.
I'll try
But
to.
yeah, thank
Thank
you so
you.
much, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you for your question and thank you for joining us. It can't be easy. I know I certainly have a hard time waking up early, so thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Matthew.
Of course. I think it's everything that we were just discussing. I think there's so many things that come into play here, though, but we've already kind of covered all of this. And again, it's a broader issue with the left as opposed to just the LGBT community. I really do believe that. I don't know what to say. It's almost like our identities as minorities it's almost like they become costumes that we put on. Like they're not really fighting for anything. And it's sad because there is so much to actually fight for. You know, when Matt XIV goes in front of his millions of followers and says, I speak up for Palestine, but I don't need to speak up for gay people in the Middle East because, you know, I don't hold them to the same standard as I hold America. That is the most racist thing you could. So what are you saying? Gay rights are okay for you in America because you have the privilege of being American, but it's not okay for the people who are being hung from cranes in Iran, for the people that are being beheaded in the West Bank, in Gaza, for the people that are being murdered in honor killings in Iraq. Like what universe are we living in that's okay? And I think the older generation understand that more because they fought for something that was real. It wasn't some imaginary thing that they were taught to reach for that's over here. It was something that actually affected them. And I think it's really, really sad and really speaks to the privilege of young people today when they can completely ignore that their fellow LGBT people are being murdered in the same part of the world that they're fighting for, by the same ideology that they're fighting for, by the same terror organization that they're fighting for. They're killing gay people. And instead of speaking up for them, you're busy spending your time accusing Israel of pinkwashing when Israel speaks about their leaps and bounds and strides they've made in LGBT rights. Well, homie, maybe you should listen to what Israelis have done to make those strides and see how you can apply them to the surrounding countries instead of accusing them of pinkwashing. Like, what is that? What does it even mean? Who isn't pinkwashing? Find me a country, a government, an organization, a major corporation that doesn't pinkwash. Okay, is it that big of a deal? Not, and I'm not saying Israel pinkwashes. I certainly, maybe there are elements of it within the government or maybe whatever. But at the end of the day, pinkwashing means that you're completely covering up whatever, like pushing a false idea for the sake of covering something else up. I've been to Israel many times. My first time Tel Aviv Pride was 2023. I went in full drag wearing pants that said in big letters pinkwasher across them because it's bullshit and it's hilarious to me. And it's like, it is the gayest place in the world. That's not pinkwashing, that's just facts. So it's a complete waste of time for these, as far as I'm concerned. These people are wasting time. Tangent number 73, sorry.
Thank you, Matthew. That was beautiful. I know, like the rest of everybody here, we agree with every single word you said, every single syllable, beautifully stated. Thank you. Carolyn, you're next.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Matthew. I'm going to try to keep my fangirling quick, but I got to tell you that I just how much I see you and appreciate you, and that your work is important, not just to those of us who are following you and seeing things and feeling seen and heard by it, but I just want you to really know that like you are important. You are going to be in the history books. This is an important moment. You're a big deal. I'm excited to be talking to you. So I just,
Very sweet. Thank you so much.
yeah, I mean, you do a lot of really tough work, and I just want you to know that your tenderness and your humanity comes through loud and clear if there's ever any doubt about that.
Yeah.
And I want to yeah.
I appreciate that recognition very much because people accuse you of not having humanity and then you start to wonder. So thank you.
I know. No, I get it. And the accusations that are mostly confessions, we see that. So thank you for your advocacy and your work. And I'm gonna ask you something sort of like a intra-Jewish community kind of question. So I hope that's okay to do in mixed company here.
Sure.
But you're in safe mixed company, Carolyn.
Safe mixed company.
Yasmine and Sarah are honorary Jews as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, please, like I've been telling Yasmine, she's come to the mikveh next time she's in town. Yeah, I feel like a little bit of shame sometimes you will say things and I'm like, oh God, thank God he said it. He said it exactly the way I would have said it if I had the courage to say it. And I recognize that there's still this part of me that's kind of engaged in this assimilation project that my ancestors have been in here in America, and as much as I hate it to admit it, I know that I'm like, I'm not the good Jew if I say this out loud. And putting the burden of that onto someone with more marginalized identities doesn't feel good to me as a white Jew, especially knowing that you have advocated so beautifully on behalf of Ashkenazi Jews in terms of like including us in like, that we're not white, we're not all the history, XYZ, I don't need to tell you. So what I feel like I've seen is white Jews either tokenizing Mizrahi Jews of color, for lack of a better term yet right now, or throwing you under the bus. So it's sort of like the white, maybe more anti-Zionist American Jews who maybe with some unrecognized privilege about being that their ancestors got here in time, right? So if we're not tokenizing you and we're not throwing you under the bus, how can white presenting Jews be an ally to you and support you and other Jews of color in your work?
So I want to say this, and I've been really big on this, and I just wrote an op-ed about this in Jewish Journal. It's not a separate history from yours. It is your history, Mizrahi, Sephardic, Ethiopian, history of any Jew anywhere belongs to every single Jew. It is our collective history, and it's really important for us to understand that. Now, with that, you're talking about tokenization. Now, that's a different story. I think it's important not to speak over the people that have lived experience with these histories. I think it's important to platform them. But at the same time, I'm hearing this term tokenization so much, and then nobody likes to be tokenized, but there's certain instances where I'm like, tokenize me. I don't care. Tokenize me. If it's going to get my message out there, tokenize me. If you need an Iranian to tell the story, I'm here. If you need a gay Jew, here I am. Tokenize me. It's fine. I think where the problem comes in is where that tokenization just kind of drops off, and it's like, okay, we're done. We crossed, check that box. That's where we need to be careful. But as far as sharing the history and the heritage, it belongs to you, honey. It's your story too, right? You, like I said before, I never viewed the Holocaust or the pogroms as something that weren't part of my history. And it's the same with the Farhud, with the Yemenite orphan situation in Yemen, where they were taking orphans of Jewish families and giving them to Muslim families, where, the Al-Aqdad in Mashhad, Iran, with the forced conversions. These are things we should all be learning about and knowing and sharing. It should be, and it's nobody's fault. If anybody's at fault, it's our systems of education and academia. because they should have been including this a long time ago. And had they included it, we wouldn't have been, you know, it's the different, many Mizrahi Jews, as shocked as we were as October 7th, we recognized it. We recognized the language. And if we recognized all of the mutilation, the sexual assault, it was recognized because historically that has happened here and there throughout the Middle East and North Africa with Jews, right? If that had been integrated in all of Jewish curriculum, people wouldn't have been as flabbergasted, like, what is this? You know what I mean? It would have been understood to a degree. And the same, by the way, for all of these professors at universities who are teaching ahistorical bullshit and completely erasing who we are and telling us who we are as Jews. Again, if our kids understood our holistic history of who we are, they would be better prepared to fight back with those professors, because right now they're just not.
Right.
And it's even Persian kids. I mean, Persian Jewish kids are not, like, still, because we've been the ones who were born and raised here, who went to Jewish school, still didn't learn their own history. So it's really important that we all learn all of it. Yeah. So go to SephardiToolkit.org.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Matthew.
What a gift that is for the world. That's really great work that you guys are doing. And you're just sharing it out there for free. There's no, that's great. Wonderful.
No expectation, no fee, no nothing. Just, it's all there though. So.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for your question, Carolyn. All right, Sarah, you're next.
Sarah.
Hi, thank you. So thank you, Yasmin. I got cut off for about 5 minutes and I freaked out. So if you already talked about this, feel free to tell me and don't answer and I'll watch the video later. Sorry. Matthew, thank you so much for being here, for doing this with us. Yasmin was the first voice I heard after Woman Life Freedom and JIMENA Amini's death, who talked about us, saw our humanity. It was like, we are kindred spirits. I call her my kindred spirits. She knows what's happening in my head. And it's just so normal for me. But then I see people like you who were not even born in Iran. And you still talk about the issue and you still talk about, like, every time something comes up on your feed, I'm like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Thank you for doing that, because I know how painful it is. And I know how your empathy would still be there, even if you don't talk about it, but you still take that burden and you still talk to the world about us, despite having to talk about being a Jew and despite having to talk about being an LGBT member. So very long thank you. Question is, what did you feel like, or how did you react to Woman Life Freedom after it came out? Why is it so important for you? Why do you keep talking about it? Why do you talk about people in Iran? You have so many different issues to bring up and to focus on. Why is this still something that you care about as an activist and as a human?
Great question. Thank you. I think it's something, first of all, that everybody should care about. I think we all should care about everything, but we can't. We only have so much bandwidth. When Women Life Freedom started with the murder of Mahsa Amini, it was almost similar, not quite as insane, but almost similar to when October 7th happened, of being completely taken aback. And when I saw the people of Iran rising up the way they did, and it's not the first time. I'm old enough to remember the quote Green Revolution of 2009 and going to the federal building and protesting for that and everything. But when I saw this uprising, I felt, it was all of our responsibility, especially those of us who are Iranian or of Iranian descent, to speak, they were saying, be my voice. So, and that was the first thing I posted. The women of Iran are literally dying to be heard. Please help them to be their voice. I also think that throughout the years, especially, I didn't start out as an activist page, my Instagram. It was a drag page. I was living my best life, especially during COVID. I had nothing better to do than get dressed up and cute and post pictures. And I would tell little stories about my life. But through doing that, I would get young queer people from Iran messaging me in my DMs. And it would be even just the most touching thing to me was like, these kids who wanted to learn how to do drag makeup and don't have the access to the makeup itself or the ability to do it openly there. And so I think I see myself in those kids, regardless of the fact that they're not Jewish, they're Iranian, and I relate to Iranian culture. At the end of the day, that's my family's diaspora experience for probably since biblical times, right? So I feel very connected to Iranian culture and Iranian people because I feel like it's mine to a degree. I also think not as much on a personal level, but on a more grander level, I truly believe that the key to a more stable Middle East is a Middle East that has a democratic, secular, liberal, and free Iran. And to go a step beyond that, I think that with all the hate that Israel receives from so many populations around the world, I think that the Iranian population, which is up to about 90 million now, many of them are either indifferent or actively care or want to feel connected to the people of Israel. You know, there was that whole movement that started, but I think that was around 2009 as well, where Iranians would take a picture and say, I'm Iranian, I love Israelis, and Israelis would do the same. So we're talking about allies, right? And we're talking about building allyships. And I think that it's really, really important not to neglect the people of Iran and speak up for them. And if I can be a connector between the two people, which as an Iranian and as a Jewish person, I feel like I'm positioned to be that, I'll do whatever I can. But in short, the reason I still speak up about it is I care, right? This is the people who speak the language that I grew up hearing at home. I didn't grow up with Hebrew. I grew up with Persian. The food, everything. So I care, and that's why I won't stop speaking about it. And because I feel like I made an unspoken promise to the people of Iran that I will keep speaking up for them, so I will.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that promise, and thank you for everything you do. And just a note that we are all fangirling for you. Like the whole chat is, we love Matthew. I love you. Oh my God,
And
I love you. Like, this is
fanboying too.
fanboying too. Like the whole. I'm gonna send you screenshots if you want. It's like we love you so much. Like
Of course,
everybody.
I'd love to see that. I'm not reading the chat, sorry, because I get
I
very
know.
distracted easily. I'm sorry.
No more. I'll send you. I'll send you a screenshot later. We love you so much.
No, it's
Thank you
hard
for
to
the
do.
promise, Aziza Delap. Yeah.
Merci, Azina.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Yasmine. You rock. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of messages. We're not going to be able to have a conversation and also keep track of what's going on. But yeah, there's a lot of love there, and all very well deserved. You've touched so many hearts and minds here today, Matthew, and I'm so grateful to you for coming and sharing your story with us and sharing your light with us. And you know, we're all very, very grateful to you. We have one more question. We're over time. Let me just double check with you, Matthew. Are you okay with one more question before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, here we go. Ari, go ahead.
Ari, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me okay, Matthew?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm also member of JIMENA, and you know, really love the work that you guys have been doing. You know, and my father's family, they're Iraqi, and I know you had Joseph Samuels on and so forth, and he told his story of how he escaped and went through Iran. And one thing I was just wondering was the Iraqi versus Iranian, I guess you could say the Arab versus Iranian experience was in many ways similar, but there were some striking differences. And you know what, you know, now there are no Jews in Iraq left, but there are still Iranian Jews left.
Right.
And I know their situation is kind of precarious and so forth, but do you think that the history of the Jews in Iran, going back to Kurus and you know, the other ancient kings, do you think that influences how Jews are seen in Iran versus how Jews are seen in Arab lands?
I think it's an interesting question. I think there are a number of elements or reasons why Jews are viewed as Jews are in Iran. First of all, they pretty much got rid of them. There's only like 10,000 left, which is 10% of what we were pre-revolution. So I think that there's this fascination, right? You have this is where the regime is kind of working against itself. When you're having kids go to school every day and scream death to Israel, death to America, kids are going to wonder, who is this Israel? Because it can't be what you're telling us, right? So there's a curiosity there. I also think that I like to believe that most Iranian people are very loving people. And I do think that also what we're seeing is a generation of people who are kind of rejecting, again, I'm going to say stuff that's going to get me in trouble, but they're kind of rejecting Islam and recognizing it as a colonizer's religion.
Absolutely.
And I've seen this happen more since woman life freedom than I'd ever seen it before, right? I mean, already I knew this growing up because growing up Iranian secular Jewish family, my parents' friends were Muslim. They had Muslim friends, but they were never practicing Muslim. They were always very secular as well. And I think the majority of Iranians in Iran are not religious people. So I mean, there's so many things just coming off the top of my head now, but like I think that there's this recognition now more than ever that Islam is they even say it's like the religion of an occupying force, right? When you look at the flag of the Islamic regime in Iran, it has Allah written in the middle of it and Arabic verses from the Quran on the side. We're Persian, we're not Arab. There's nothing against it, but it's not us, right? It's not what Iranian culture and heritage would it originated as, and there's still a very strong sense and memory of what it was, because Iranians, being the stubborn motherfuckers that we are, refused to let go, right? Nowruz. How many times did they try to abolish Nowruz in Iran, which is the Persian New Year, which is rooted in Zoroastrianism, which were actually also considered dhimmis under Islam. It's still there. There are elements of it that are very much still alive in Iranian culture, and we're very proud people and very proud that we maintained our Persianness, and very proud that that there's still Nowruz and all of these things that Shaba Yalda, like all of these things that go back to our ancestral Persian, Zoroastrian roots. So I think there's a lot more of that than there is in places like Iraq. I think Iraq, you know, have fully taken on the Arab identity and the Arab religion of Islam, and that's fine. But there's key differences. I mean, when all of these Jews were being expelled or forced to leave the Arab countries in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, Iran was the golden age of Jews in Iran, right? Under Pahlavi. Say what you will about him, but Jews, for the first time, had equal rights. For the first time, you know, because of the Constitutional Revolution of 1906, which went into effect a little bit later than that, but the Jews were allowed out of the ghettos. Jews were allowed full equality under the law. That's not to say there wasn't anti-Semitism there, but it was a very, very different experience. In fact, there were many Jews from Iraq who, when they were fleeing Iraq, fled by crossing the border into Iran. Some of them actually stayed, and the rest were allowed, didn't have to sneak. They were allowed access to go to Israel through Iran. So there was a cooperation there. So there's so many things that come into play, but it's a very different story than the story of Iraq.
Thank you, Matthew.
I will add this, there is a connection there, because we were actually, I mean, if you go far back enough, yes, we were all one people as Jews, but the Jews of Iraq and Iran are very much connected, because at one time it was the Babylonian Empire, it was all the Babylonian Empire, and then the Persian Empire was all the Persian Empire. So it was only these more recent borders that sort of broke us up.
Yeah, and even the Safavids ruled Baghdad for a while. Yeah. Well, thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Ari. That was a really good one. And Matthew, everything you say is true. And of course, all of that, you know, we should be applauded. It's obviously very different histories, a much better history in so many ways. But there's also a lot of really deep darkness there as well. Like I remember learning
Absolutely.
about the Jews of Mashhad when I was at the Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, and they talked about how for over 100 years Jewish people had to hide their identity and like secretly do Shabbat, and like everything was completely hidden. You had to teach your kids to hide who they were so that your family would
Yeah.
remain safe, and they would only marry within each other, within their own community, because of course you can't let the world know who you really are. And to survive like that for over a century is amazing. It's miraculous, in fact. But that was in Iran. So it's like
Yes.
there's, as much as
Yeah,
we can, I
I
guess
don't mean to.
relatively speaking, it was better, but it certainly
No,
wasn't good.
some of the worst atrocities towards Jewish people in the Middle East were in Iran throughout history. When I say it was the golden age of Jewry in Iran, it's actually just a speck of time within the broader history. I mean, we're talking about the second Shah Pahlavi, right? So 1941 to 1979, it's nothing. Some of the worst atrocities were committed against Jews in Iran. We were kept in ghettos. We weren't allowed out of them until fairly recently. We weren't allowed to touch fruit. We weren't allowed. All of these Dini laws that you hear about were very strongly, specifically after they were very strongly enforced specifically after, I think, the 16th century. I forget which dynasty was ruling at that time. But that's when they really, really cracked down. And yeah, I mean, the history is immense. I could go on and on about it, but there was, you couldn't walk out when it rained because there was the fear. We were najis, right? We were impure. The water that from the rainwater touched a Jew and then touched the foot of a Muslim, they would have caught that impurity. We weren't allowed to touch fruit at the supermarket. I mean, there's written testimonies about that. I think it was Mark Twain, who visited and wrote the testimony. So yeah, it was pretty bad. And like the rest of the Muslim world, I mean, it really depended on who was ruling at the time and how lenient or not lenient they were. And that also went from city to city. I mean, we talk about the golden age of Iran under the Pahlavi dynasty, but I mean, it's easy for me to talk about. My family lived in Tehran. They were in the big city, right? And it also varies from who you talk to. If I've asked my mom's brother what kind of anti-Semitism he experienced growing up in the 70s, right, in Iran, and he was like, "Oh, I really didn't get it. A few comments here and there." And I asked my dad, he's like, "I have no nostalgia. I don't want to go back. The what we would call today is microaggressions were all over." He said he had friends. His friends would say things like, talk shit about Jews and then say, "But you don't count. You're not like them," right? Anybody who knows what that feels like knows it's a shitty feeling. So it really depends who you talk to, what their experiences, how observant they were, where they grew up, how they grew up. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Tangent number 132, sorry.
We love your tangents. Somebody said in the comment here, like, your tangents are the best part of this podcast. So we love it. But for anyone interested in a little bit more about the history of Jews in Iran, I had a guest named Isaac who grew up in Iran, and who talked to us all about his experience. In fact, he wrote a book about it as well. So you can watch that episode and get a bit more information.
Great
All right.
episode.
Yeah, he's such a lovely man. God,
Yeah.
he's so just like you, just all heart, just such a
Thank
good
you.
soul, just like the light comes through.
Well, you know,
Matthew,
it takes one to know one, so back out.
thank you so much. So before we wrap up now, here's the question. Is there anything that you wanted to say, didn't have a chance to say, or something that you want to share with everybody, like where we can follow you, or any information that you want to share with us all? Some last final words of wisdom. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I would say follow me on Instagram, Matthew Nouriel, and also follow JIMENA. It's JIMENA, JIMENA _voice on Instagram and on Facebook. And head to JIMENA.org, sign up for our newsletter. I produce them. I work very hard on them every week, so please read them.
Every week. That's impressive.
Sometimes twice a week. I did 2 this week. Thank you. What else? That's it. Just be true, be real. And if you get pissed at somebody for saying something you don't like, don't unfollow them. Just ask them what's up.
Yeah. And think about it. If you're getting pissed, there's probably something within you that is, there's a reason for that, you know? Look into it. Be
Absolutely.
curious, you know?
Absolutely.
So much beauty and joy comes outside of your comfort zone. So as long as you stay within that comfort zone and you don't want to be offended or you don't want to be pissed off or you don't want to be hurt, then, you know, that's where the growth comes. So you're limiting yourself.
Exactly. We don't always have to agree, but we should always respect each other. And the last thing I want to say is Zan Zendagi Azadi always and Am Yisrael Chai forever.
Beautiful. We have to end it there. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matthew. Again, mwah.
Okay.
Have a
Thank
weonderful
you.
weekend,
You as
week,
well.
month, year, life. Talk to you
Thank you.
soon.
You as well. Thank you, both of you, Sarah and Yasmine, for having me on. It meant the world to me. And thank you for everybody who joined us and listened and watched.
Bye, everyone.
There we go.
You did.
Okay, so
Mine's
that
broken.
yours is it. I don't know, maybe you have to update it or something.
Yeah, you're just more special. You have more love.
No. Look, she got
All
it.
right. Oh, I worked for him too. Oh, I gotta work harder. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye,
Love you
everyone.
all.
After hearing all that, you might be left wondering, what can I do? How can I help? Well, this is why I created a nonprofit called Free Hearts, Free Minds. We are the only organization dedicated exclusively to helping these free thinkers. We empower them with our programs and supportive community, lifting them up so they can heal, speak out, and begin to make positive changes, not just in their own lives, but within the broader community around them. If this is a cause that resonates with you and you want to make a difference, one way to do that is by donating to Free Hearts, Free Minds. Because not enough people care about this cause, we need people like you to help fuel this change. You can donate via our website, freeheartsfreeminds.com. Thank you. Every dollar you donate makes a difference.